Night 1. The scratching. The scratching in the wall started again at 11:47 p.m, right on schedule. I was lying in bed, on the edge of sleep, when I heard a faint scritch, scritch, scritch inside my bedroom wall. It was a soft, repetitive sound, like a small animal trying to claw its way out. Every night for the past week, it had begun around the same time and just lasted a few minutes. I held my breath and checked the glowing red numbers of the digital clock. 11:47, as expected. At first, I had told myself it was just mice or trapped possums. Old houses like mine settle and breed noises in their bones. But every night, the scratching returned at the exact same minute, never a moment early or late. Rats don't carry tiny watches. As the noise continued its subtle rhythm, a prickle of unease crawled up my arms. Something about the precision unnerved me deeply. I swung my legs out of bed, heart thumping unevenly in my chest. The room was cold against my bare feet as I crept toward the wall. The scratching was louder here, not frantic, just steady, purposeful. I pressed my ear to the wallpaper, the floral pattern rough against my cheek. For a moment, I imagined I could hear something else under the scratching, a faint whisper or sigh, like a distant voice buried in static. I closed my eyes and concentrated, but the instant I did, the scratching stopped. Silence. My own breath sounded too loud. I stayed there for 10 seconds, 20, waiting for it to resume, but the wall stayed quiet and still. The only sound was the wind outside, brushing tree branches against the house. I finally exhaled and stepped back. "It's just pests," I muttered aloud, trying to reassure myself in the emptiness of my dark bedroom. Just an annoying coincidence. I almost believed it. For good measure, I rapped my knuckles on the wall, once, twice. Nothing stirred. If it was an animal, perhaps I'd scared it off for the night. Still, as I returned to bed, a nagging thought kept my mind racing. Why always 11:47 p.m? Animals don't run on precise timetables. And why only a few minutes? My rational brain had no answer. Eventually, I drifted into a shallow, fitful sleep. The earlier unease followed me into uneasy dreams. In one, I dreamed I was buried under floorboards, scratching to get out. But in the dream, my own fingers made the sound, tracing patterns in the dark. I woke up drenched in sweat sometime before dawn, unable to recall the rest of the nightmare. I told myself in the grey morning light that it was nothing. I would buy mouse traps after work tomorrow. Surely that would solve it. Yet, as I got ready for the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was subtly out of joint, like a picture frame tilted just a few degrees off. Something was wrong, and it had already begun. Day 1. Little anomalies. Sunlight brought logic and normalcy, or so I hoped. I drove to work with a thermos of coffee and the radio turned to my usual morning news. The broadcaster droned on about weather and politics, a comforting monotony. By the time I pulled into the office parking lot, I'd almost managed to laugh at myself for letting a weird noise unsettle me so much. People live with raccoons in their attics, I mused. Get a grip. Work was the same as always. A half-lit cubicle, the low hum of fluorescent lights, the steady clack of keyboards. By afternoon, I was absorbed in a mind-numbing spreadsheet, nearly forgetting my uneasy night. Nearly. But little things kept niggling at me. For one, I felt oddly watched. Not by any particular person. My co-workers were absorbed in their own screens, but by the office itself. It sounds ridiculous, but I kept catching myself glancing up at the security camera in the corner, feeling its fisheye lens pointed directly at me. Every office has cameras, of course, but I'd never noticed this one with such prickling awareness. Its red recording light blinked in slow, steady intervals. For some reason, I found myself unconsciously matching my breathing to its rhythm until I realized what I was doing and shook my head to clear it. At lunch, I left the building for some air and a sandwich. I stopped by a little cafe across the street. As the barista passed me my change, I noticed a small tattoo on her wrist, a delicate sunflower with petals colored a deep indigo blue. It struck me as unusual. Sunflowers aren't blue, but I only noticed it in passing. She handed me my coffee with a polite smile, and I returned to my building's lobby, sipping the brew and chalking my edginess up to a lack of sleep. The lobby's television was tuned to a 24-hour news channel, but the screen was just showing a jumble of pixels. Great, the signal's out, I thought walking by. Then the TV image flashed to static for a split second, and a harsh sound burst forth, before cutting to black silence. The security guard behind the reception desk frowned and smacked the side of the TV. I lingered for a moment. In that split second of static, I almost thought I heard a fragment of a voice or a word. It sounded like Holton, my last name. Probably a coincidence. Static and imagination. Still, I felt a small knot tighten my stomach. Back at my desk, I found the yellow sticky note affixed to my monitor that hadn't been there before. On it, in my own hurried handwriting, were the words, "Meeting 3:30, Holton, don't forget." I blinked. The note was definitely in my handwriting, a quick scrawl with the same purple ink from the pen I keep in my drawer, but I had no memory of writing it. In fact, I had no meeting at 3:30. My calendar was clear all afternoon. I asked my nearest cubicle neighbor, Greg, if he'd seen anyone at my desk. He just shrugged. "Not that I noticed. You've been there all day, right?" he said. "Mostly, except grabbing lunch just now," I replied, turning the sticky note over in my fingers. The back was blank. I must have written it, I thought. Maybe I meant to remind myself of something else and wrote meeting by mistake. And why sign my own last name, Holton? As if I were addressing myself formally. It didn't make sense. Greg chuckled. "Leaving notes for your forgetful self. Good idea, man." He didn't seem concerned, so I mumbled something about being forgetful and tossed the note in the trash. But the incident disturbed me more than I had let on. Was I so sleep-deprived that I'd scribbled a note and completely blanked on it? At 3:30, nothing happened. No meeting, of course. I found myself glancing at the office camera again, that red light blinking patiently. I had the bizarre impression that something new I had seen in the note and was waiting for. I don't know what. I shook off the thought. It was just an intrusive fancy, a byproduct of an anxious mind. Still, I left work a bit early with the excuse of a headache. Better to go home and catch up on sleep. On the drive home, I turned the radio to drown out my churning thoughts. An old love song was playing, crackling with static at the edges of reception. I fiddled with the dial, but the station was drifting. As I slowed to a red light, the song faded entirely, replaced by a wash of white noise. I sighed, preparing to just turn it off, when Through the hiss came a fragment of a whisper. "Hear me." The voice was faint and genderless, drowned in static. I froze, staring at the radio. Did I just hear that? For a moment, I felt a presence, like someone was in the car with me, breathing softly next to my ear. The whisper came again, just a broken syllable buried in the static. "Hol, hear me." My name, Holton, seemed interwoven in the noise. My throat tightened. The light turned green, and a honk from behind jolted me. I hit the gas, heart hammering. The radio spit out a high whine, and then resumed the love song, now clear as day, no static at all. I left it playing, volume low, while my mind raced. Maybe some rogue signal, I thought, or a prank broadcast. But how would it insert my name? I couldn't think of a rational explanation. By the time I got home, the sun was dipping below the horizon and my nerves were frayed. I double-checked that I had locked the car, then double-checked my front door lock after I entered. The house was silent. I made a quick dinner and tried to watch TV to unwind, a random sitcom on Netflix. The laughter track felt artificial and grating. I wasn't really paying attention to it anyway. I kept glancing to the corners of the living room, half expecting to see what? I didn't know. Nothing felt normal. Eventually I gave up and decided to turn in early. As I passed by the hallway mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself. Tired eyes, pale face. I looked like I hadn't slept in a month. No wonder I was imagining voices and static. Stress can do that, right? I told myself that as I crawled under the covers. It's just stress and lack of sleep. Tonight, I'd use earplugs. If the scratching in the wall came at 11:47, I didn't want to know. I just wanted rest. I set the phone plugs on my nightstand and watched the clock tick to 11:40, 11:45. My eyelids grew heavy. For the first time all day, I almost felt safe. Night 2. Intrusion. At 11:47 p.m. on the dot, I felt a subtle vibration through the mattress and heard a muffled scritch, even through my earplugs. My eyes snapped open in the dark. The scratching was back, perhaps even a bit louder than the night before. Despite my exhaustion, curiosity and dread gnawed at me. I wanted to ignore it, to sink into oblivion, but I couldn't. What if it wasn't pests at all? What if someone was in the walls? A crazed squatter or... I didn't finish that thought. Instead, I quietly slid out of bed and pulled the earplugs out. The scratching was indeed louder than before, and this time, it didn't stop when I moved. It was coming from the same spot by the headboard. Cautiously, I picked up my phone and opened the voice recorder app. If I captured the noise, maybe I could show a contractor or hell, even the police if it turned out to be an intruder. I crept toward the wall, hit record, and held the phone up. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The noise continued steadily. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, fast and arrhythmic. I half expected the noise to stop again, but it went on, seemingly oblivious to me. A minute passed. The sound kept going, neither slowing nor speeding. The pattern was so even, so controlled. This is not a mouse, I thought, skin crawling. I realized I was holding my breath. My hand was trembling with the phone, but I forced myself to keep it in place. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. It didn't fade out or scurry away. It just ceased mid-scrape. as if the source had been cut off abruptly. In the pregnant silence, I caught a whiff of something odd, a faint trace of chemical odor, like antiseptic or ozone. That made my nose wrinkle. I exhaled, relief mixing with adrenaline, and quickly backed away from the wall. If something had known I was recording, I wanted to capture any other sounds too. My phone's screen was still lit, timer counting on the recorder. Another sound began to filter in, so quiet, at first I thought I was imagining it. A soft tap, 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 coming from down the dark hallway, beyond my bedroom door. It was the distinct sound of footsteps on the hardwood floor. Tap, tap, then a pause. My blood turned to ice water. I lived alone, and I had locked the doors. I was certain of it. The tapping footsteps resumed, a few slow steps at a time, like someone exploring cautiously. They were coming from different directions of the living room, moving toward the bedroom hall. I realized I was recording my own ragged breathing and forced myself to clamp a hand over my mouth. Each soft footfall on wood made my stomach clench. Whoever it was, they were in my house, uninvited, walking deliberately towards my bedroom. How had I not heard a door or window break? The windows were all latched. The only door had been deadbolted. None of it made sense. But I had no time to puzzle it out. I needed to act. Heart pounding, I silently opened my bedside drawer and pulled out the only weapon I could think of, a heavy metal flashlight. My clammy fingers wrapped around its weight. I thumbed off my phone screen to hide the light and slid it into my pocket. The recorder still running. The footsteps had reached the threshold of my bedroom door now, but then stopped again. Whoever it was, they were right outside, perhaps in the hallway, listening, watching. My mind conjured an image of a figure standing just beyond the doorframe, silhouetted in the dark, head cocked, sensing me. I realized I hadn't shut the bedroom door. It was open about a foot, a dark gap yawning there. I could see nothing through it but blackness. Minutes dragged by in utter silence. I stood there in my thin t-shirt and sweatpants, bare feet, clutching the flashlight so tight it hurt. I stared at that gap, every muscle tense. The house was deadly still. Maybe I had imagined the footsteps. Maybe no one was there at all. Or maybe they were waiting for me to make a move. A sudden click shattered the silence. A short, soft sound. It took a second to recognize it. The light switch in the hallway. The hall light turned on by itself, flooding through the crack of the door. I flinched, blinking in the sudden brightness. My mind reeled. There was no one visible at the door, but the light was on. How? My grip on the flashlight slicked with sweat. I had to either confront this or hide, and I'm not proud, but I chose to do something cowardly. I spoke. Trying to sound authoritative, I called out, "Who's there? I have a weapon." My voice wavered in spite of me. No answer. The light in the hall remained on, humming quietly. I waited, straining to hear any movement over the sound of my thumping pulse. Still nothing. I took one cautious step toward the door. My reflection glanced back at me from the dresser mirror, eyes wide, face drawn. I looked as terrified as I felt. Another step. The floor was cool under my feet. I reached the door and with a burst of nervous energy yanked it fully open. Flashlight raised to strike. Nobody. The hallway was completely empty, lit by the single bulb in the ceiling. I could see the front door was down the hall, still closed and bolted. The living room beyond was dark, not a whisper of movement. I stood there in the hallway, shaking, trying to steady my breathing. If someone had been out here, they had nowhere to go but past me or into the living room, and I'd have seen that. In a daze of confusion, I padded down the hall, checking first the bathroom, empty, then the small coat closet, empty, just my jackets and vacuum cleaner. The front door was locked as I left it. Windows also locked from inside, intact. It dawned on me that the hall light was the only one that came on. None of the living room lamps were on, just that single overhead light outside my bedroom. I inched over to the light switch panel on the wall. It was a simple up-down toggle. Slowly, I reached out the flashlight and nudged the switch down to off. It resisted a little, as if it had been forcefully stuck, then clicked off. Darkness fell over the hall again. I retreated to the bedroom and shut the door this time, turning the lock on the knob with a satisfying click. I even shoved the heavy chair against the door for good measure. My heart was still racing, but I felt a small measure of safety in the barricade. Only then did I remember my phone was still recording. With shaking hands, I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. The app was running, now at 5 minutes, 2 seconds. I brought the phone to my face and very quietly whispered, "What the hell?" Then tapped stop on the recording. I saved the audio file and played it back, curiosity overcoming fear. I had needed confirmation that I hadn't lost my mind. The recording played. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound was clear, even a little louder than I recalled. Hearing it through the speaker made my skin crawl anew. After about a minute, the scratching abruptly cut off. Then, faintly, it picked up the tap, tap of footsteps. They were soft. I had to press the phone to my ear, but they were there. My own sharp inhale was audible, and then the footsteps stopped, presumably when I noticed the light. There was a long stretch of silence on the recording. I skipped ahead. Nothing, nothing. Then the recorder caught my voice calling, "Who's there? I have a weapon." I sounded afraid. I heard myself step into the hall, creak of floorboards. Then a faint click as I turned the light off with a flashlight. After that, there was a tiny burst of garbled noise that I didn't remember hearing in the moment, like a brief spike of interference. It almost sounded like a voice, just at the edge of hearing, saying something. "Here are," or "we are." The distortion was brief, and the recording ended with the sound of me whispering, "What the hell?" and fumbling with the phone. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, replaying that snippet over and over, volume to max. A voice. I was sure of it. Not mine. It had the same staticky quality as the radio whisper in the car, and it definitely sounded like words, not random noise. On the 4th or 5th listen, I thought I could make it a phrase. "We're here," or "over here." It was impossible to be sure. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I didn't know what to do with this. If I showed this recording to anyone, they'd think it was a prank, or that I was picking up radio signals, or that I was crazy. Hell, I was starting to think I was crazy. People don't just have ghostly intruders who walk around and vanish. I spent the rest of that night huddled in my bed, back against the headboard, eyes fixed on the door. The chair wedged under the knob felt flimsy, but nothing else happened. No more scratching. No footsteps. Eventually, around 4 a.m, I must have dozed off from sheer exhaustion, because I jolted awake at sunrise with a flashlight still in my hand. My body ached and my head throbbed. I stumbled out into the hall, squinting in the early light. Everything looked ordinary. No signs of entry, no footprints on the hardwood floor. It was as if the night's events had been a figment of my imagination. But I had the recording. I played it once more in daylight just to confirm it wasn't all in my head. The scratching, the footsteps, the voice, they were there. Faint, but undeniable. Something real had happened. I needed help, or at least another person to be around. I decided to call my closest friend, Maria, and tell her, well, not everything, but enough to convince her to let me crash at her apartment the next night. I wasn't keen on spending night 3 alone here, schedule or not. Day 2. Disintegration. I took the day off work. On the phone I told my boss I had a stomach flu. If you heard my shaking voice, it wasn't hard to believe I was ill. That done, I paced my living room, phone in hand, staring at the walls as though the house itself were an enemy. My mind felt like it was fraying at the edges. We are here. The possible words from the recording looped in my head. Who were we? I dialed Maria's number around 9 a.m. It rang a few times, then went to voicemail. She was probably still asleep or already in class. She was taking early morning grad classes, by the way. I left a message asking if she could call me back, saying it was urgent, but trying not to sound hysterical. While waiting for her call, I decided to inspect the wall where the scratching originated. In daylight, my fear felt a bit more manageable, and I wanted answers. I half expected to find obvious scratch marks or holes, but the floral wallpaper, ugly, faded, looked completely intact. I went to the garage for a toolkit and came back with a screwdriver and a flashlight. If an animal was stuck in there, maybe I could see it through the air vent just a foot off the floor. I kneeled and unscrewed the vent cover. A metallic smell wafted out, dusty, stale air. No sign of rodents, no droppings or fur. I shone a flashlight inside. The space between the walls was cramped, of course, just framing and insulation. But something caught my eye. Faint, vertical gouges on one of the wooden studs, as if scratched by something with claws or nails. They were unusually long, evenly spaced marks in sets of 5. I ran my finger over one. It was thin but deep. Could a rat make that? Or a person? The wood around the scratches looked oddly smooth, almost polished. A shudder ran through me. I hastily replaced the vent cover. As I was tightening the last screw, my phone rang, startling me. I scrambled up, nearly dropping the screwdriver. It was Maria calling back. "Thank God," I muttered, answering. "Hey, Maria." Holden? Is everything okay?" she asked. She sounded concerned. Maybe I had let more panic seep into my voicemail than I intended. I glanced around, suddenly unsure where to start. I decided to keep it simple. I had someone try break into my house last night," I said quietly. "I'm okay, but it was really freaky. Could I crash at your place tonight? I just don't feel safe here." "What?" Are you serious? Oh my god, are you hurt? Her voice spiked in alarm. I'm fine. I didn't actually see who it was. Might have been a prowler or something. But yeah, I scared them off. The police didn't find anyone. I lied about the police automatically. I hadn't actually called them, but I wanted to downplay the situation so she wouldn't ask too many follow-ups. Jesus, yeah, of course you can stay here. You should have called me during. Do you want me to come over now? I felt tears prick my eyes at her concern, but I blinked them away. I didn't want to admit how terrified and confused I really was. No, it's okay, it's daytime. I'm alright for now. I'll come by in the evening if that's okay. Absolutely. I'll be home after 6. If you need me to come sooner, just text me. And Holton... Her voice was gentle. You sure you're okay? You sound off. I swallowed, trying to steady myself. I didn't sleep much, that's all. I'll explain more when I see you. Thanks, Maria. We hung up with her extracting a promise that I'd call if anything else happened. I felt a small measure of relief. Tonight at least I wouldn't be alone. With that in place, the day was mine to endure. I decided I might feel better out of the house, so I took my laptop and headed to the public library. The idea of quiet, public normalcy appealed to me, and maybe I could do some research, though on what? I wasn't sure. Haunted houses, home intruders, hallucinations. None of the likely topics felt promising. The library was sparsely populated, just a few elderly patrons and a mum with a toddler in tow. I chose a computer in a back corner where no one could glance over my shoulder. Part of me felt silly, but I started by googling things like hearing voices and static, walls scratching same time every night, and feeling watched hallucination. The search results were a mixed bag. Forum posts about supposed hauntings, discussions of auditory hallucinations, even some paranoid conspiracy stuff about government surveillance. One thread on the paranormal forum had a user describing noises at regular times and strange voices. They were advised it could be carbon monoxide poisoning causing auditory hallucinations. That sparked a small hope. Maybe all of this was explainable by some kind of gas leak or poisoning affecting my brain. I quickly looked up symptoms. Headache, dizziness, hallucinations, memory issues. I didn't have a headache, and I'd been pretty dizzy with fear, but no, carbon monoxide doesn't make footsteps turn lights on, and I had a detector in my hallway which hadn't budged from green. Scratch that. I shifted to searching about stalkers or intruders using gadgets. Could someone broadcast voices via radio to target one person? Some spy tech sites talked about laser microphones that can eavesdrop through windows, or devices to project sound. It all seemed far-fetched for some random person to use on me without reason. I had no angry exes, no jealous co-workers. I was, if anything, utterly average and under the radar. After an hour of this, I leaned back and rubbed my eyes. The library's fluorescent lights gave everything a slightly sickly hue. I gazed around at the rows of books, the quiet librarian stamping returns. All was normal and peaceful. For a second, I wondered if maybe I should just stay here until evening, but that felt cowardly. Plus, I had some hours to kill. I decided to distract myself with a random book, something comforting. I wandered to the fiction section, looking for one of those cozy mysteries or a sci-fi adventure. My fingers trailed along the book spines absent-mindedly. That's when I noticed something strange. Every book on the entire shelf was turned backwards, their spines facing in, pages out. It looked deliberate, all those pages fanning outward. I frowned and glanced around. No librarian in sight. This was odd, but perhaps some shelving mistake. I stepped closer and gently pulled one of the reversed books out to see its cover. The title was The Observation. I had never heard of it. The author's name was smudged on the worn jacket. I opened it curiously. The book was completely blank inside, page after page of emptiness, with only a single sentence printed right in the middle of page 50. "We've been trying to reach you." I slammed the book shut, heart jolting into my throat. What the? My hands were shaking. I shoved the book back onto the shelf and took a step away, as if it had burned me. Books don't just do that. Was this a sick prank? I realized I was breathing rapidly, on the verge of a panic attack right there in the library. I closed my eyes and counted backwards from 10, forcing myself to take slow breaths. When I opened them again, the shelf of books was perfectly normal, spines facing out, titles displayed as they should be. I gingerly reached out for The Observation, where I had found it. The book wasn't there. In fact, none of the titles looked like that. The gap where an entire shelf had been backwards was gone. All books were present and correctly shelved. A cold wave of unreality passed over me. Could I have imagined the whole thing? It seemed so vivid. I actually touched that book, didn't I? My fingertips felt numb. Maybe I truly was losing it. This wasn't a haunted house. I was having a psychotic break, seeing impossible things in broad daylight. I backed out of the aisle, needing to be out of the library immediately. As I hurried toward the exit, I nearly collided with the librarian. She gave me a startled look. "Oh, are you alright?" I mumbled an apology and rushed past her, out into the cool afternoon air. I didn't stop moving until I reached my car. Sliding into the driver's seat, I locked the doors and just sat there trembling. My mind was splitting at the seams. Blank books with messages, really? Was I so tired that I dreamt it on my feet? I didn't want to think about it anymore. I checked my watch, nearly 4 p.m. 2 more hours before Maria expected me. Maybe I should just go now, I thought. But I felt guilty barging in on her early when she might not be home yet. Instead, I decided to go back home and pack an overnight bag. Feed my cat. Oh, I realized I haven't mentioned him. Oscar, my orange tabby, who normally comes out to greet me. Oddly, I hadn't seen Oscar all day, but perhaps he was hiding after a rough night, and then head to Maria's. The drive back was jittery. Every flicker of shadows from trees, every mailbox on the curb. I eyed them all with suspicion. The radio remained off. I didn't dare listen to it now. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something out of place immediately. My front door was ajar, open about a foot. The sight of that dark gap made my stomach lurch. I was certain I locked it when I left. I always do. Had someone broken in broad daylight? I turned off the engine and quietly got out, not sure if I should call the police or not. The house looked silent. No obvious movement inside from what I could see. Hesitant, I approached the door, slowly pushing it open with one finger, flashlight ready in my other hand. I'd brought it with me everywhere after last night. Hello? I called, voice shaky. Anyone here? No answer. Just the faint smell of my own home. Wood polish and a bit of must. Cautiously, I stepped in. The living room was just as I left it, except my eyes narrowed. A single item was on the coffee table that hadn't been there before. A manila file folder, thick with papers, and a small portable hard drive on top of it. The label on the drive read, Holton_0, in neat print. My heart thudded. Holton, O, my name. O for Oscar, my middle name. I dared to creep closer. The folder also had something written on the tab. Observation log 5. I picked it up with sweaty fingers and opened it. Inside were pages and pages of typed text. The format looked like reports or transcripts. I flipped through the first few. 8:30. Subject showers. Users dial soap. Temperature medium. No anomalies. 8:47. Subject makes breakfast. Scrambled eggs, wholemeal toast. Consumed alone at kitchen counter while looking at phone. News. 9:02. Subject phone call to Maria. Request to stay overnight. Subject's affect distressed. I stopped. A wave of dizziness hitting me. That line was describing what I had done this morning in exact detail. Even noting brand of soap in my breakfast. It was impossible. I scanned further down the page. 9:18. Subject retrieves tools from garage. Opens wall vent in bedroom. Observes scratch marks. Record A5. Subject appears perplexed, anxious. They'd seen me do that? There was even a record A5 mentioned, like a reference. I felt exposed, violated. I shuffled faster through the pages, catching snippets. 11:04. Subject arrives at city library, uses public computer, searches on auditory hallucinations, voices and static, feeling watched, wall scratching every night. 11:53. Subject experiences induced perceptual event in stacks, see addendum. Physiological response, elevated heart rate, adrenaline spike. Event discontinued after 45 seconds. 12:02. Subject leaves library in distressed state. 12:47. Subject returns home. Induce door ajar scenario to test response. Subject enters cautiously. Finds provided materials. My hands were shaking so badly that pages rattled. Induced perceptual event? Test response? Provided materials? This report was reading like I was some lab rat in an experiment. I felt a rising panic and rage in equal measure. I slammed the folder shut. My eyes darted around the living room, searching for cameras, a two-way mirror, anything. "Who's there?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Why are you doing this to me?" I listened, chest heaving. No answer. The house was so quiet I could hear the faint electric buzz of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I grabbed the portable hard drive with my name on it. It was already plugged into a small USB battery pack, apparently ready for me. Hand trembling, I connected it to my laptop on the coffee table. It popped open easily, no password. There were dozens of audio files inside, labeled by dates and times. The most recent was marked with yesterday's date and time. 11:47 p.m. The file size looked large. I clicked it. A media player opened, and after a moment of static, I heard my own voice. It was a journal entry I had never recorded. 11:47 p.m. Experiment log. The subject is currently asleep. Introducing stimulus via interior wall unit 4. Moderate scratching sound. Subject awakens. Heart rate elevated. Subject listens. Appears curious, slightly afraid. This is the 5th night of consistent stimulus. Subject's adaptive response is minimal. Proceeding to phase 2 tonight with an in-home environmental manipulation. My breath caught in my throat. It was me, but I had no memory of saying these words. And I sounded so cold, clinical, like a scientist or technician. The voice continued. 11:52 p.m. Subject is investigating hallway after lights triggered. Subject's fear response is strong. No direct confrontation. Subject returns to room and barricades door. Data collection ongoing via remote units. I slammed the laptop shut, pulse roaring in my ears. That voice, it was definitely mine, but devoid of any emotion. It was narrating my own actions, describing me as the subject. I lurched up from the couch so fast the folder spilled to the floor, pages fanning out. I staggered back, away from the table, nearly tripping. My vision swam with panic. Was I doing these things in some sort of fugue state? Or had someone fabricated my voice? The concept of deepfakes and AI voice crossed my panicked mind. But how could anyone get my voice to narrate such specific real-time things? And why? I pressed myself against the wall, trying to steady the spinning in my head. On the floor, one of the pages of the log lay face up. It read, 1:30. Subject exhibits severe distress upon discovery of log and audio evidence. Likely to attempt flight or seeking ally. Containment protocol engaged. As I read that, I heard the soft click of the front door gently closing. My head snapped up. The door was now shut. I was certain I'd left it open in my frantic entry. My heart seized. Containment protocol. I ran. I bolted toward the back door that led to my yard, flinging it open so hard it banged against the exterior wall. I didn't even pause to grab my keys or phone. I just needed to get out. Outside, the world was disconcertingly normal. Bright afternoon sun, neighbors' wind chimes tinkling next door. I sprinted across my yard toward the street. Maybe I could make it to a neighbor, or just anywhere public, but I didn't get far. 2 steps onto the grass and I felt a sudden lurch in my vision, as if the entire world skipped a frame. My legs faltered. I stumbled to my knees. The grass, the sun, all of it flickered, just for a split second, replaced by a yawning black void laced with faint grid lines, like I'd seen behind the curtain. Then the world came back. I gasped, disoriented. Before I could push myself up, another wave of vertigo hit. The scene around me stuttered. I saw my yard, then darkness, then my yard again. It was like a failing video projection. A high-pitched whine filled my ears. No, filled the air around me. I clapped my hands over my ears and tried to stand, but my limbs felt heavy, unresponsive. I managed only a few more stumbling steps towards the street, each movement sluggish. The world flickered rapidly now between the sunny neighborhood and the featureless black space. On, off, like a light about to burn out. Then, with a final stutter and a pop, the world went black entirely, silent. I wasn't unconscious. I could still feel my body, still feel the ground under my knees, but I was somewhere dark and empty. I panicked and flailed my arms, finding nothing in front of me. No house, no trees, nothing. Just a flat, solid surface below me and endless black in every direction. A moment later, dim shapes began to appear ahead. Ghostly outlines of furniture, walls, my living room, reassembling itself. But it was monochromatic, drained of life, like a poorly loaded image. I saw the shadowy contour of my couch, the coffee table, the shelves. The manila folder lay on the floor, its papers mid-spill, frozen in place. Time itself seemed to stand still in that half-formed world. And there, next to the table, stood a figure. They were the only thing that looked solid, real. I say figure because I couldn't tell if it was a person. It was roughly humanoid and tall, but beyond that, it was wrong. Like looking at a human silhouette carved out the fabric of reality, a cutout of deeper darkness against a black background. 2 pinpoints of faint light where its eyes might be. Or were those reflections? It was utterly still, observing me, indifferent. My blood ran cold. I tried to scream, but no sound came out in this void. I tried to move, but my body was still sluggish, as though unseen hands held me in place, forcing me to kneel. The figure tilted its head slightly, in a motion that conveyed curiosity, or pity. Between us, the scene of my living room flickered again, then suddenly jumped into full color and brightness. I was back in my reality, sprawled on the grass of my yard, gasping for breath as though I'd been underwater. The sun had dipped lower, late afternoon now. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere, normal and oblivious. I staggered upright. The back door of my house was still open behind me. The living room beyond looked normal. No sign of the dark figure. Had it been standing right there in my house? Or in some layer of it? My head was pounding and my vision blurred at the edges. I fumbled through my pockets. Miraculously, my phone was still there. In my panic, I hadn't dropped it. I snatched it out and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. It rang, clicked, then went dead. The call didn't connect. There was no sound at all, not even the dial tone, just silence. I tried again. 911, call. The phone screen showed it was dialing, but nothing happened. After a few more seconds, the screen went black and the device rebooted itself. Tears of frustration sprang up. I wiped them away, turning in a circle, unsure what to do. If I couldn't call out, I'd have to run to someone's house, find help in person. Maria's place was across town, too far. Maybe the elderly couple next door? I stumbled forward, aiming for my neighbor's driveway, when a new sound stopped me in my tracks. My own voice, crackling over some unseen loudspeaker or intercom. "Holton, stop," it said calmly. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, seeming to vibrate in the air around me. It was flat, affectless, and the same tone I heard on that recording. "Don't run. It's too late to run." I backed up, terrified, looking for the source. Was there a speaker on the pole? A drone? The sky was empty and overcast, the street deserted. The voice continued, echoing slightly. "Please remain calm. This will be over soon. You will be returned to your routine shortly." No, I shouted hoarsely at the open air. "Leave me alone." My voice sounded small and hysterical in comparison. There was no response. Instead, I felt a sudden pressure building in my skull, a deep ache that grew rapidly. I cried out, clutching my head. It felt like something was inside my brain, pressing outward, squeezing. My vision swam. I fell to one knee. The last thing I remember before blacking out was the neighbour's front door opening and old Mrs. Lee stepping out, a look of concern on her face as she saw me on the ground. "Holton, dear, are you all right?" she called. But my tongue wouldn't form words. The world flickered once more and then blinked out into nothing. Night 3. Overwrite. I awakened in darkness to a familiar scritch, scritch, scritch sound. For a fleeting moment, I thought I was back in my bed on night 1, that all the last day's terror had been a nightmare. But as my eyes adjusted, that hope evaporated. I was not in my bed. I was sitting upright in a chair, arms at my sides. It was so dark I could barely see my own hands. The scratching noise was still there, echoing in the quiet. But it wasn't coming from a wall. It was coming from inside my head, scratching at my mind rather than my ears. I realized it was the memory of the sound, looping endlessly in perfect rhythm. I tried to move and discovered I couldn't. My arms and legs were unresponsive, like they weren't mine. I was paralyzed from the neck down, only able to breathe and blink. Panic set in like a fire. I strained to budge even a finger, but nothing. I could feel the chair beneath me. It felt like one of my own dining chairs, hard wood. Yes, I thought I recognized the shape of it. Was I home? I rolled my eyes downward. In the dim light, I could just make out that I was indeed in my living room, seated at the dining table. A small lamp was in the corner, its light a faint orange glow. The room looked strangely normal after all that happened, except for the fact I couldn't move and the ominous silence that hung in the air. Then I noticed something that turned my blood to ice. I was not alone. Directly across the table facing me was another me, an exact mirror image of myself, sitting in the opposite chair. Same clothes, even down to the scuff on my left sneaker. The same face and disheveled hair. In the weak lamplight, I could see his eyes were open and staring at me, unblinking. My heart seized. I would have screamed, fallen out of the chair, scrambled away, but I remained frozen in place. Only my eyes able to dart around in the growing terror. The other me did not move either. He just stared, his face expressionless, eerily calm. I'm not sure how long I sat there, locked in a silent face-off with myself. It could have been seconds or minutes. Time felt stretched and unreal. My mind was racing, even if my body was inert. Was I hallucinating? Had the stress fractured my identity? Or was this the thing behind all of it, this doppelganger? Then, my copy spoke. His lips moved with stiff unnaturalness, and the voice that came out was flat and monotone. The voice from the recordings.
"Subject is conscious,"
he said. His eyes blinked, one then the other, out of sync.
"Motor restrictions in place. Commencing reintegration."
My blood pounded in my ears. "Who are you?" I tried to shout, but my lips barely parted and a slurred half-whisper emerged. Who? My own voice sounded thick and distant to me. It took everything in me to even get that out. The other me cocked his head slightly, like a curious animal.
"We are observation,"
he answered in that dead tone. The way he said "we" sent a chill through me. I struggled again to move, to scream, anything. Only my fingers twitched faintly, a small victory of will. He continued watching me, his head twitching in a slight nod, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, those eyes fixed back on mine.
"You will not remember this part,"
he stated. There was something almost like reassurance in his tone, if it hadn't been so devoid of emotion. A sudden high-pitched tone pierced the air. The same feedback whine as earlier, but louder now. It drilled into my skull. My double didn't react to it. He remained motionless. But inside my head that tone resonated, stirring nausea and dizziness. I felt something unravel in my thoughts, like a thread being pulled from a tapestry. Memories, my memories, began flashing through my mind's eye. Childhood birthday parties, my first day at high school, the smell of my grandma's attic, the taste of blood when I busted my lip at 7, the blue sunflower tattoo on the barista's wrist in the morning. A cascade of moments, great and small, all ripped free and flying past. I tried desperately to hold on to each one. "That's mine!" I screamed inside as I watched the younger version of me blow out candles, as I remembered the exact pattern of scratches I'd seen on the wall stud that morning. But the pull grew stronger, inexorable, and the images blurred together, speeding up. Tears streamed down my face. I wasn't even sure if they were real tears or some mental representation of despair. The high tone finally faded, leaving a profound silence. In that silence, I grasped for my thoughts, for who I was. For a horrifying few seconds, there was nothing. Just a void where my life had been, a black hole in my memory. I knew my name, Holton, but everything that made me, felt distant or gone. Then, like a gentle rain, new thoughts started trickling in. Impressions, feelings that weren't mine. A sense of deep calm, of purpose. Memories I didn't recognize. Walking in a vast dark space filled with humming machinery. Voices speaking in numbers and codes. A vision of countless eyes watching from the walls. These images were alien and cold, and they slotted into the empty parts of me like puzzle pieces. I wanted to recoil, to reject them, but I had no strength to fight. I realized with dawning horror that I was being overwritten. The person across from me, the other Holton, was pouring parts of itself into me, replacing what was gone. No, I'm me, I tried to murmur, drool slipping from the corner of my mouth. My tongue felt wooden. The figure that looked like me finally moved more significantly. It, stood up from the chair in a jerky motion. I heard joints crack as if unused to moving in this body. It stepped around the table and stood directly behind me. I could only see it peripherally. I sensed it looming over my shoulder. If I could have shuddered, I would have. A hand, my own hand, identical, descended into view and rested almost gently on my shoulder. I felt the weight and warmth of it. The touch was oddly comforting and horrifying at the same time.
"You'll be fine,"
said the voice from behind me, softly now, an imitation of human reassurance.
"Routine will return. You will continue, and we will observe. That is all."
Inside, a spark of resistance flared. They might erase memories, but some core of me was fighting like a cornered animal. With monumental effort, I managed to rasp out a single word. Why? The grip on my shoulder tightened slightly. I sensed a pause, as if the thing was considering whether to answer. Then, very quietly, it responded.
"To understand."
It moved to face me again, letting go of my shoulder. I saw that its movements were slightly smoother now, as if it had warmed up to my body. Our eyes met once more and I saw something new behind those irises. A glimmer of what might have been sadness or nothing at all. Hard to tell. The paralysis holding me eased just a fraction then. I could suddenly breathe easier, my lungs expanding fully. I realized I could turn my head a bit. The other me stood a couple of feet away, arms at its sides, watching. I seized the slight freedom and attempted to stand. My legs wobbled and I nearly collapsed, catching the edge of a table for support. The thing made no move to stop me. It only observed, head tilted. My mind was a jumbled mess. I had to get out. I had to get help. But to where? Who could possibly help me against myself? I took one shaky step, and another. My legs remembered how to walk. Even as my mind struggled to recall something as basic as my home address. I was halfway to the front door when the thing spoke one final time, in a tone almost gentle.
Don't stray from the schedule.
I turned back to look at it, my doppelganger, question in my eyes. It, he, now, almost indistinguishable from me, gave the slightest smile. And in that smile I saw a hint of something human. Then, before my eyes, he simply vanished. One moment standing there, the next, gone. Not with dramatic flash or noise. I blinked and the space it occupied was empty. I was alone, in my own home. It felt normal, quiet. I heard the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock in the kitchen. Had it always ticked that loudly? My heart was pounding and I was trembling all over, but I could move. Immediately, I stumbled to the front door and flung it open, expecting twilight or night outside. Instead, bright morning sunlight spilled in, making me squint. Morning? I realized with confusion that it was daytime, the sun fairly high. The wall clock read 8:32. Had an entire night passed? The last I remembered was late afternoon collapsing in the yard. I'd lost at least half a day. Across the street, a jogger was passing by, earbuds in, oblivious to my disheveled state. The world looked normal. For a wild moment I thought about running out and begging for help. But help for what? The threat was gone, apparently. And what would I even say? Instead, I closed the door softly and sat down on the foyer bench. I felt exhausted, hollowed out, but strangely, also calm. The fear was gone. Or if not gone, it was distant, like a memory of pain rather than immediate pain. I tried to think about the events of the last 2 days, but they were fuzzy, disjointed. I knew something awful had happened to me, but when I probed my memories, I found gaps. For instance, I remembered being terribly scared of some scratching noise, but I couldn't recall exactly why it scared me so much. It seemed almost trivial now, and I remembered I had been planning to stay at Maria's. Maria! She'd be worried sick. My phone was still in my pocket, amazingly. It was on now, as if nothing had happened, but the battery was almost dead. There were multiple missed calls and frantic texts from Maria. Hey, I'm heading home soon, you coming? Need me to pick you up? Holton, are you okay? Please answer. I'm about to call the cops, I'm really worried. I'm coming over, leaving now. Those were all from yesterday evening, then nothing. She must have come by. My heart skipped. If she had come to the house while it was here, did she find me? There was one more text, a bit later. They said you weren't home. Where are you? Apparently I wasn't here when she arrived with police, assuming she did involve them. Or maybe they couldn't get in and assumed I left. I rubbed my temples. I felt guilty for worrying her, but what could I even tell her now? That I had a mental breakdown, got drunk? I certainly wasn't going to tell her the truth, whatever the truth even was. Already it felt unreal, like fragments of a fever dream. Perhaps that was merciful. My eyes landed on the coffee table, The manila folder and hard drive were gone. No sign of them. My laptop sat close where I left it, undisturbed. I opened it up, hands shaking a bit, and checked the audio files from earlier. It was empty. Not even a single file. The folder itself vanished a moment later. Some process cleaning up. The only evidence that anything had truly happened was my memory, and even that was slipping away like sand through fingers. I had a sudden fear. What if I forget everything? Perhaps that was for the best. But I wanted to hold on to something, some proof I wasn't insane. I fumbled through the drawers for a pen and notepad. Finding them, I began to scribble down the key points I recalled. Scratching in the wall, voices in static, duplicate me, observation log, overwritten. My handwriting was unsteady. Even as I wrote, the notion of a duplicate me sounded absurd. And indeed, as I sat there in the morning light, it became harder and harder to truly believe those events had physical reality. Already, I found myself rationalizing. Maybe I had a psychotic episode. Maybe I became my own stalker, writing notes and talking in my sleep. The brain is capable of terrible tricks. Carbon monoxide, stress, who knows? I set down the pen. On the paper, I'd also absent-mindedly drawn a little symbol, a rough sketch of an eye, watching. I scratched it out until the paper tore. The house was quiet, peaceful even. I found myself craving the normalcy of my routine. Perhaps that would moor me. So I did what I always do on a Thursday morning. I showered. I used my dial soap, the water at a comfortably warm setting. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked ordinary, if a bit tired. No shadowy figure lurking behind me, no static flickering over my features. I got dressed, made a simple breakfast of toast and eggs, sat at the kitchen counter eating while scrolling aimlessly on my phone. My cat, Oscar, there you are, buddy, wound around my ankles, purring like nothing was amiss. It was almost easy to believe that. I decided I would go to work. I felt an odd compulsion to stick to that plan, go to work, act normal, keep on schedule. It felt important not to deviate, though I couldn't articulate why. Just a quiet whisper in the back of my mind, urging me on. Before leaving, I checked one thing. I walked to the bedroom wall where the vent was. I unscrewed it carefully once more and peered inside. The long scratch marks I'd seen were gone. Instead, the wood was smooth and dusty as if untouched for decades. Of course, I thought, pests. Probably it had been my imagination. I left the house. As I locked the front door, I noticed Mrs. Lee from next door waving at me hesitantly. She looked like she wanted to say something. I walked over, forcing a smile. "Hi, Mrs. Lee," I greeted her. "Holton, dear, you gave us a fright yesterday," she said, peering at me with concern. "We saw you out back and then you were just gone when my husband went back to check. Are you feeling all right?" I paused. So she did see me collapse. How to explain that? I wasn't feeling well. I got dizzy and actually fell. Then I crawled back inside and must have passed out. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to alarm you. Her brow wrinkled. Passed out? Goodness. We almost called an ambulance. But when Tom went over, he said you went there. We thought maybe you'd gone to the pharmacy or something. I just nodded, unsure what to say. I'm okay now. It might have been a migraine or low blood sugar. She accepted that with a polite but unconvinced nod. Well, take care of yourself. If you need anything, we're here. Thank you. And thanks for checking on me. I gave a little wave and headed to my car. One more loose end. Maria. As I drove, I rehearsed a simple explanation for her. I'd say it was a bout of stress and a mix-up with my phone. My phone had died, which was true enough by now. It had shut off right after I finished breakfast. I'd apologized profusely and promised to make it up to her. But as I emerged onto the main road, something unusual happened. I found myself driving not towards Maria's campus or my office, but taking the highway on-ramp, headed east out of town. My hands on the wheel felt oddly separate from me, choosing the path on their own. "Where am I going?" I murmured out loud, confusion creeping in. I intended to go to work, didn't I? But it was as though on autopilot my body had decided on another destination. A faint answer floated up from that quiet new part of my mind. The schedule has changed. I did not question it further. My face in the rearview mirror looked calm, determined. I realized I knew where I was going, even if consciously I hadn't planned it. About an hour out of the city, off a certain exit, there was an empty field at the end of a dirt road. I had never been there, yet I could picture it clearly, bathed in morning light. That was where I needed to be. As I drove faster, a peculiar serenity settled over me. The dread, the fear that had once gnawed at me were memories fading fast. What replaced them was an emotional, almost like anticipation. Something is wrong. A small distant voice in my head, possibly the last remnant of the old me, trembling with warning. But it was easily drowned out by the rising tide of purpose and inevitability. The radio, which I don't recall turning on, played a soft static that smoothed out into a gentle tune. I hummed along, even though I didn't know the melody. The music was comforting and strange. I glanced down momentarily and noticed a smear of ink on my arm. A pen mark. I realized it was something I'd written earlier. 4 words, partly smudged. Scratching, voices, copy. The last was illegible. I stared at it, puzzled as to what it meant. Probably nothing important. I rubbed my skin and the ink smeared to a blur. A blue SUV passed me on the left, its driver glancing my way briefly. In his side window reflection, just for an instant, I thought I saw not my own face, but the dark silhouette with pinpoint eyes, sitting in my passenger seat, watching me. I felt a flicker of alarm, but when I looked directly, there was nothing. Just an empty seat and a trick of morning light. I let out a breath. Everything was fine. Everything was as it should be. Ahead, my exit loomed. I flicked on the turn signal. The clicking sound it made was steady, familiar, right on schedule.